A black woman in a power suit stands on a private airport tarmac, staring at her own luxury jet. The crew just physically blocked her from boarding, assuming she was an imposter. What happens next will cost them everything they thought was secure. This wasn't just about one flight. This was about respect, power, and a reckoning 15 years in the making. Before we dive into this shocking story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their race, smash that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because stories like this need to be heard. You won't believe what happens when this billionaire CEO decides enough is enough. Let's get into it. Diane Mitchell had built an empire from absolutely nothing. At 48 years old, she stood as the CEO of Mitchell Global Logistics, one of the largest black-owned shipping companies in America, with a personal net worth of $375 million. 23 years of grinding, sacrificing, and proving herself over and over had brought her to this moment. She had clawed her way up from a logistics coordinator making $38,000 a year to commanding a company that moved goods across continents. This morning should have been perfect. She was flying from Los Angeles to New York for the biggest deal of her career, a merger worth $1.2 billion that would cement her legacy forever. The private jet waiting for her on the tarmac at Van Nuys Airport was her crowning achievement, a Gulfstream G650 she had purchased 6 months earlier for $42 million. It wasn't just transportation. It was a symbol. Proof that a black woman could reach the absolute pinnacle of success in America. She had bought it to escape the microaggressions of commercial aviation, the suspicious looks in first class, the flight attendants who assumed she was in the wrong seat, the passengers who treated her like she didn't belong. This jet was supposed to be her sanctuary. Diane pulled up to the private terminal in her Mercedes S-Class, the morning sun glinting off the polished black paint. She wore a cream Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, her leather briefcase containing documents that would reshape her industry. She felt good. Powerful. Ready. The merger meeting was in 6 hours, and she had prepared for months. Every number memorized, every objection anticipated, every detail perfect. As she stepped out of her car, she could see her jet gleaming on the tarmac, its engines already running, ready for the cross-country flight. But something felt off. The crew was standing near the boarding stairs, huddled together, whispering. They kept glancing at her, then looking away. Diane walked toward them with confidence, her heels clicking against the pavement. She had flown with this crew 4 times before. They knew her. They had served her champagne, laughed at her jokes, been professional and courteous. Captain Richard Hayes, a white man in his mid-50s with silver hair and a perpetual stern expression, stepped forward as she approached. His body language was different today. Closed off. Defensive. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your identification and boarding credentials," Richard said, his voice flat and official. Diane stopped walking, confused. She smiled, thinking this was some kind of joke, maybe a security drill she hadn't been informed about. "Richard, what are you talking about? We've flown together 4 times. I flew with you to Chicago just 2 weeks ago." His face remained stone cold, no recognition, no warmth, nothing. "I don't know who you are, but this aircraft is the private property of Ms. Diane Mitchell. If you're not authorized to board, I need you to step away from the aircraft." The words hit her like a physical blow. He was serious. Completely serious. Her own captain, the man she paid $60,000 a month to fly her jet, was telling her she couldn't board her own plane. Shock rippled through her body, followed immediately by a hot surge of anger. She forced herself to stay calm, to breathe, to think clearly. This had to be a misunderstanding. It had to be. She reached into her purse slowly, her hands trembling slightly, and pulled out her driver's license. Richard's hand moved toward his waist, where security personnel often kept weapons, and her heart started pounding. "Slowly," he warned, as if she were a threat, as if she were dangerous. The co-pilot, Stephen Bradford, a white man in his 30s with sandy blonde hair, came down the stairs, his face tight with concern. "Rich, we need to call security. She's not leaving." Diane's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I am Diane Mitchell. This is MY Jet. What is happening right now?" The flight attendant, Jessica Torres, a young Latina woman in her 20s, emerged from the cabin holding her phone. "I'm calling the real owner right now to verify this situation." The absurdity of the moment crashed over Diane like a wave. They were calling her phone. To verify her identity. To prove she was herself. Her phone started ringing in her purse, the sound piercing through the tense silence. Jessica looked confused, staring at her phone screen, then at Diane, then back at her phone. Diane didn't answer. She wanted to see exactly how far this would go, how deep this insanity ran. She needed to understand what was really happening here. Richard stepped closer, his voice hardening. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the aircraft immediately, or we'll have airport security remove you forcibly. 23 years of building an empire. $42 million of her own money sitting on this tarmac. And she couldn't board her own plane." The humiliation burned through her chest, hot and suffocating. But underneath the humiliation was something else, something colder and more clarifying. Rage. Pure, focused rage. Because she understood now. This wasn't about security protocols or mistaken identity or following procedures. This was about the color of her skin. They looked at her, a black woman, and their brains could not reconcile what they were seeing with what they believed was possible. A black woman could not own a $42 million jet. Could not be a CEO. Could not belong in this space. So they erased her. Denied her. Treated her like a criminal. And in that moment, standing on the tarmac with the morning sun beating down and 3 people who worked for her treating her like she was nobody, Diane Mitchell made a decision. She wouldn't just get on this plane eventually. She wouldn't just prove them wrong and move on. She was going to make absolutely certain that everyone involved in this moment would remember this day for the rest of their lives. Airport security arrived within minutes, 2 white officers in their standard uniforms, radios crackling with static. Dennis Powell was older, probably in his 50s, with a thick mustache and tired eyes. Mike Garrett was younger, maybe early 30s, looking uncomfortable before he even understood the situation. Richard immediately took control of the narrative, his voice authoritative and certain. "Officers, this woman is attempting to board a private aircraft without proper authorization. She's refusing to leave the area." Dennis turned to Diane, his expression professionally neutral. "Ma'am, can I see some identification please?" Diane handed over her driver's license and her company identification badge without a word. Her hands were steady now, her mind sharp and clear. She was in control of herself even if she wasn't in control of this insane situation. Dennis examined both items carefully, then looked at Richard with a question in his eyes. "This says Diane Mitchell. That's the owner's name, correct?" Richard didn't miss a beat. She could have stolen those documents. The real Ms. Mitchell is a high-level corporate executive. Look at her. The implication hung in the air like poison. A black woman couldn't possibly be a high-level corporate executive. Couldn't possibly own this jet. The racism wasn't even subtle anymore. It was right there, naked and ugly, for everyone to see. Jessica jumped in, her voice rising with false confidence. "The owner would have notified us in advance if someone else was using the aircraft today. We have strict protocols. This doesn't follow any of them." Diane's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Check the aircraft registration documents. Check the ownership papers. Call my corporate office. The number is on my business card." Mike Garrett shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with how this was unfolding. "Ma'am, maybe we should just verify everything to clear this up quickly." Richard interrupted him, stepping forward with authority. I've been flying private jets for 28 years. I know when something isn't right. My instincts are telling me this situation is not legitimate. Stephen appeared with a tablet, holding it up like it was evidence in a court case. This is the owner's profile from our crew briefing materials. The screen showed Diane's professional headshot from 2 years ago. Different hairstyle, shorter and straightened instead of the natural curls she wore now. Different glasses, rectangular frames instead of the current cat-eye style. But unmistakably her. Same face, same eyes, same strong jawline. Dennis compared the photo to Diane standing in front of him, looking back and forth several times. Before he could speak, Richard shook his head dismissively. Hair's completely different. Could be anyone. These photos can be edited. Anyone can look like anyone with the right software. Diane felt the rage building but kept her voice level and cold. She pulled out her phone, opened her banking application, and held it up to show her account with Mitchell Global Logistics clearly visible. Richard barely glanced at it. Banking apps can be faked. Spoofed. There are scams like this all the time. She switched to her email, showing dozens of messages from her executive assistant confirming today's flight schedule, the New York meeting, every detail of her itinerary. Jessica peered at the screen and shrugged. Email addresses can be spoofed too. Hackers do it constantly. Every single piece of evidence was being dismissed. Every proof of her identity, her ownership, her right to be here was waved away like it meant nothing. And Diane understood with absolute clarity that no amount of documentation would matter. Because the real issue wasn't evidence. It was belief. They would not believe that a black woman owned this $42 million aircraft. The airport manager, Thomas Wilson, arrived on the scene, called by security to handle what was clearly becoming a situation. He was in his 60s, white, with gray hair and the kind of face that had spent decades in customer service, smooth and practiced at managing conflict. His eyes met Diane's and there was a flicker of recognition. He knew exactly who she was. She had filed a complaint about discriminatory service at this airport 6 months ago, about being questioned excessively while white jet owners were waved through without scrutiny. His face showed recognition, then calculation, then careful neutrality. Ms. Mitchell, is it? Perhaps we should step into my office and sort this situation out calmly and professionally. Sort it out. Like this was a billing dispute. Like she was being unreasonable. Sort what out exactly? I'm boarding my aircraft. There's nothing to sort. Thomas's smile was patronizing, the kind professionals use when they think you're being difficult. Let's not make a scene here. These situations can always be resolved quietly if everyone stays calm and rational. A scene. She was making a scene by existing. By insisting on her rights. By refusing to accept being treated like a criminal. A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the commotion. Other pilots in their uniforms, passengers heading to their own private jets, ground crew members taking a break. All of them watching a black woman being denied access to an aircraft while white men in uniforms stood around her like she was the problem. All of them seeing exactly what this was, even if no one would say it out loud. Diane's phone rang again. Her assistant Monica, wondering why the jet hadn't taken off yet, why Diane wasn't in the air already. Diane answered and put it on speaker, her voice carrying across the tarmac. Monica, tell these people who I am. Monica's voice came through, confused and concerned. Who? What's happening? The crew of my jet won't let me board. They don't believe I'm Diane Mitchell. There was a beat of stunned silence, then Monica's voice rose in disbelief and anger. Are you kidding me? Put them on the phone right now. Monica spent 5 minutes explaining to Richard, providing company details, employee identification numbers, verification codes that only someone with internal access would know. She recited the aircraft's tail number, purchase date, insurance policy numbers. Every single detail that proved beyond any doubt that Diane Mitchell owned this jet, and Diane Mitchell was standing right there trying to board it. Richard listened to all of it with his arms crossed, his face skeptical and closed. When Monica finished, he said simply, "We need official documentation from the charter company confirming the flight." Diane's voice was pure ice. "There is no charter company. I own this aircraft outright. Personally. It's not leased. It's not chartered. It's mine." The words hung in the air, and she saw the disbelief ripple through the crowd. A black woman owns a $42 million jet outright. The concept was so foreign to their worldview that they literally could not process it. Thomas tried one more time, his voice taking on an edge of frustration. "Ms. Mitchell, in my office we can contact the FAA, verify the registration officially, and resolve this whole misunderstanding in 10 minutes. I'm not going anywhere except onto that aircraft." Dennis and Mike exchanged glances, both clearly uncomfortable with the idea of physically removing her but also unwilling to challenge Richard's authority or Thomas's management. No one wanted to be the person who escalated this further, but no one would stand up and say what needed to be said either. That this was wrong. That this was racist. That this needed to stop immediately. The standoff continued, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the minutes ticking away, and Diane's meeting in New York getting closer and closer. Diane pulled out her phone again and made a call. To her lawyer, James Chen, a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in Los Angeles, a man who had represented her through acquisitions, mergers, and countless business deals over the past decade. She put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. "James, I'm being denied access to my own aircraft by my own crew at Van Nuys Airport." James's voice came through immediately, shifting into sharp legal mode without hesitation. "Put the captain on the phone right now." Richard took the phone reluctantly, his jaw tight, clearly annoyed at this development. James didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This aircraft, registration number November 847 Delta Mike, was purchased by Mitchell Global Holdings LLC on March 15 of this year for $42 million. Diane Mitchell is the sole owner of that LLC and therefore the sole owner of that aircraft. The purchase was financed through Wells Fargo Private Bank, and the insurance policy is held through Global Aerospace Underwriting. I can provide you with policy number, underwriter contact information, and bank verification. Would you like me to do that?" Richard's voice was skeptical. "How do I know you're really her lawyer and not part of some elaborate scam?" James didn't hesitate. "Google my firm, Chen & Associates. Call our main reception line. Ask for James Chen. I'll wait right here on this call while you verify my identity." Jessica quickly pulled out her phone and did exactly that, typing frantically, her face growing more uncertain as she confirmed that yes, this law firm existed, yes, James Chen was a partner there, yes, this was all verifiable and real. James continued, his voice getting harder. "Every second you delay Ms. Mitchell from boarding her own aircraft constitutes unlawful detention, interference with private property rights, and possibly false imprisonment depending on how this escalates. Do you understand the legal liability you're creating for yourself and this airport?" Thomas Wilson stepped forward, his professional mask cracking slightly, frustration bleeding through. "Now let's not throw around inflammatory legal terminology here. We're all trying to handle this reasonably." James's laugh was sharp and humorless. "I'm an attorney. Legal terminology is literally my profession. And what you're currently witnessing and participating in is discrimination based on race. That's not inflammatory. That's factual." The word discrimination landed like a bomb. Dennis and Mike both stiffened, their body language changing immediately. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was potentially a federal civil rights violation. This could become official complaints, investigations, lawsuits that would follow them for years. Richard's face flushed red. I am following standard security protocols that apply to every passenger equally. James shot back immediately. Your protocol is racial profiling. Ms. Mitchell has flown with you 4 times previously without any issues. She has provided multiple forms of identification. She has provided verification from her office. She has demonstrated specific knowledge of the aircraft that only the owner would possess. And you're still refusing her access. We both know why. And will be filing formal complaints with the FAA, the airport authority, and potentially pursuing criminal charges depending on how you proceed from here. Thomas went pale, the color draining from his face as the reality of the legal exposure sank in. Criminal charges? That seems excessive for a simple misunderstanding. False imprisonment isn't a misunderstanding. It's a felony, James replied calmly. Diane took the phone back, her voice steady and controlled. James, please send every document proving my ownership of this aircraft to Thomas Wilson's email address immediately. Within 3 minutes, Thomas's phone started pinging repeatedly with incoming emails. Purchase agreement with full financial details. Aircraft registration documents from the FAA. Insurance certificates. Tax records showing the aircraft as a business asset. Photographs from the delivery ceremony 6 months ago, showing Diane standing beside the jet with the Gulfstream representatives, all of them smiling, champagne glasses raised in celebration. Thomas scrolled through the documents, his face changing with each email, the professional mask slipping away to reveal discomfort, embarrassment, and the dawning realization that this situation was far worse than he'd thought. He knew. Of course he knew who she was. He'd known from the beginning. But now he had to publicly acknowledge it, had to admit that his crew and his security had racially profiled a customer, and there was no way to make this disappear quietly. Captain Hayes, it appears there has been a significant misunderstanding here. Richard's voice was stubborn, defensive. I'm still not satisfied. Documents can be forged. This could still be an elaborate fraud. Diane had reached her absolute limit. Her voice cut through the air like a whip. You want more proof? Fine. Stephen, what's the Wi-Fi password on this aircraft? Stephen blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. What's the Wi-Fi password that you use on every single flight? He hesitated, then answered reluctantly. Mitchell Sierra 72. And what's engraved on the interior cockpit door handle, the one you touch every time you enter the flight deck? Richard's face tightened. How would you possibly know that detail? Because I chose it personally when I had the aircraft customized. It says rise higher. That was my mother's favorite phrase before she died of cancer 3 years ago. It's the only engraving in the entire aircraft. Jessica's face went pale. She'd been inside the cockpit. She'd seen that engraving dozens of times and never thought about it. Diane kept going, her voice gaining power. In the main cabin on the left side, there's a framed photograph. It's the only personal photograph in the entire aircraft. It shows a woman holding a young girl. That's my mother Dorothy holding me when I was 7 years old at our apartment in Watts. The coffee maker is a Miele built-in system that cost $18,000 because I refused to drink substandard coffee at 40,000 feet. The bedroom has Egyptian cotton sheets, 400 thread count, white with navy blue trim, and they're replaced every 6 weeks whether they need it or not. Every detail was specific, personal, intimate. Details that no one could know unless they owned the aircraft, unless they had specified every customization, unless they lived in this space. The crowd had grown larger now, and the silence was complete. Everyone understood what they were witnessing. Thomas tried one more time, his voice weak. Captain Hayes, I really think we need to allow Ms. Mitchell to board. Richard's face was red, his voice rising with defensive anger. She could have been a flight attendant on a previous charter flight and learned these details. She could have been cleaning crew. She could have been anyone with access. The accusation was crystal clear now, spoken out loud for everyone to hear. She was too black to be the owner, so she must have been the help. Must have been service staff. Must have been someone whose place was to serve, not to own. Diane's voice could have cut through steel. A flight attendant. You think I'm a flight attendant who somehow memorized personal details about the owner's dead mother? I'm saying there are explanations. You're saying that a black woman couldn't possibly own this jet, so you're inventing increasingly absurd explanations to avoid accepting reality. She turned to Thomas, done with this entire charade. I want a new crew. Immediately. I want these 3 people off my aircraft and I never want to see them again. Thomas stammered, trying to find some middle ground that didn't exist. Ms. Mitchell, these are contracted employees with legal agreements. We can't simply terminate their employment without proper procedures and documentation. They work for me. I contracted them through your service. And I'm firing them. All 3. Right now. Richard actually laughed, a short bark of disbelief. You can't fire us. We have contracts with specific termination clauses. You can't just decide you don't like us. Diane's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. Read Section 7, Clause 3 of your employment agreement. Either party may terminate the contract immediately for cause. Racial discrimination, harassment, and denial of service based on protected characteristics constitute cause. You're done. James's voice came through the phone speaker, still listening to everything. And I'll be delighted to detail that cause in extensive legal filings if any of you want to challenge this termination. The laughter died in Richard's throat. Jessica's voice cracked with panic. Wait, please. I was just following Captain Hayes's lead. I didn't personally make any decisions. This isn't fair. You called security on the owner of this aircraft. You participated fully in this discrimination. You're finished. Stephen tried next, his voice desperate. This is insane. We genuinely didn't know. We were trying to protect the aircraft and follow security procedures. You can't destroy our careers over this. Diane's voice was final. You didn't want to know. When I provided identification, you dismissed it. When my lawyer provided documentation, you questioned it. When I demonstrated personal knowledge only the owner could have, you invented explanations. You didn't want to believe a black woman could own this jet, so you refused to see the evidence right in front of your faces. And yes, I absolutely can and will destroy your careers over this. Because if I don't, you'll do this to the next black woman. And the one after that. And the one after that. This ends now. As Diane waited for the replacement crew to arrive, she sat in her Mercedes with the air conditioning running, trying to calm the rage and hurt coursing through her body. She thought about how she had gotten here, to this moment, to this jet, to this level of success that people literally could not believe was real. 23 years ago, she had been a logistics coordinator at a mid-sized shipping company, making $38,000 a year, sitting in a cubicle under fluorescent lights that gave her headaches. She had noticed inefficiencies in their routing systems, waste in their processes, opportunities to save hundreds of thousands of dollars and improve delivery times. She had written detailed proposals, created presentations, spent her own time developing solutions. Her supervisors, all white men who had been there for decades, had ignored every single suggestion. Dismissed her ideas without consideration. Talked over her in meetings. Made jokes about her ambition. So she had started her own company with $12,000 she had saved over 2 years, living with 3 roommates, eating ramen, walking to work to save bus fare. The first year, Mitchell Global Logistics brought in $72,000 in revenue. After expenses, she had made less than she would have working at McDonald's. She had almost quit 100 times. The banks had refused her loans, telling her she didn't have sufficient collateral or business experience, even though white men with less experience and worse business plans walked out with funding. Suppliers had demanded payment up front because they didn't trust her to pay her invoices, while giving net 60 terms to white-owned companies. Clients had questioned her competence constantly, asked to speak to her supervisor when she was the owner, assumed she was the secretary or assistant. Every single day had been a battle to be seen as legitimate, as capable, as worthy of basic professional respect. Her mother Dorothy had worked as a house cleaner her entire adult life, cleaning the homes of wealthy white families in Beverly Hills and Brentwood. She had never made more than $22,000 in her best year. She had cleaned toilets and scrubbed floors and been invisible to the people whose homes she maintained. And she had told Diane, over and over, every time Diane came home crying from another day of being dismissed and diminished, "Baby, they will always underestimate you because of your skin color. Always. You can use that. Let them underestimate you. Then prove them so completely wrong that they can't ever recover from it. Make them remember your name." Diane had built Mitchell Global by being smarter, faster, more reliable, and more innovative than every single competitor. By working 18-hour days for years. By sacrificing relationships and social life and sleep. By betting everything on herself when no one else would. By year 5, the company hit $3 million in revenue. By year 10, $47 million. By year 15, $230 million. She employed 460 people now, and 70% of them were women or minorities because she knew exactly what it felt like to be overlooked and she refused to perpetuate that system. When she was 35, she had bought her first luxury car, a BMW 7 Series she had dreamed about since she was a teenager washing cars at a dealership to make extra money. The car salesman had tried to redirect her to the used car lot, assumed she was looking for financing on a 3-year-old model, couldn't comprehend that she wanted to pay cash for a brand new vehicle. She had bought 2 BMWs that day, one for herself and one for her mother, just to watch his face change. At 42, she had purchased her first home in Bel Air for $6.3 million. The neighbors had complained to the Homeowners Association within a week, claiming she was renting it out for parties, that there was too much traffic, that the character of the neighborhood was changing. She had been living there quietly with her daughter Simone, no parties, no noise, no problems except that she was black in a predominantly white neighborhood. Every achievement had been questioned. Every success had been attributed to luck, or affirmative action, or some kind of fraud. Never to her intelligence, her work ethic, her business acumen, her sheer relentless determination. When she bought the Gulfstream G650 6 months ago, she had thought it would be different. Private aviation was supposed to be the ultimate level of service, of respect, of personalized attention to detail. No more commercial flights where passengers clutched their bags when she sat down next to them. No more first-class cabins where flight attendants assumed she was in the wrong section and needed directions to economy. Her own jet meant her own crew, her own terms, her own space where she would finally be treated with the respect her success had earned. Except she had made one critical mistake. She had trusted the charter service company to vet and hire the crew professionally. She had never met Richard Hayes in person before hiring him. All the interviews had been conducted via video call. Now she understood. He had accepted the job thinking the owner was white, or thinking she was a figurehead, a diversity hire, someone's trophy wife maybe. When she had shown up, undeniably black and undeniably in charge, his worldview couldn't accept it. His brain literally could not process a black woman as the owner of a $42 million aircraft. So he had rewritten reality to fit his prejudices. She thought about Simone, her daughter, 23 years old and graduating from Harvard Business School in 2 months. Simone would inherit this company, this wealth, this legacy that Diane had built from nothing. And Simone would face the same doubts, the same dismissals, the same barely concealed hatred, unless Diane fought back so hard right now that the next generation of racist crew members thought twice. Her phone buzzed with a text from Monica. Replacement crew is 20 minutes out. And Diane, this is all over social media. Someone in the crowd filmed everything. Diane's stomach dropped. She opened Twitter and saw it immediately. The video had been posted 40 minutes ago and already had 50,000 views. She watched herself on the tarmac, watched Richard blocking her from the stairs, watched the security guards arrive, watched the whole humiliating scene play out from a stranger's perspective. The caption read, "Black CEO denied boarding her own private jet by racist crew." The comments were flooding in, thousands of them, support and outrage, and of course the inevitable racists claiming she must be lying, must be scamming, couldn't possibly own a jet. The video was spreading exponentially. 100,000 views. 200,000. CNN had picked it up. NBC. TMZ. Every major news outlet was running with it. Her phone started ringing constantly. Investors wanting to know if it was true. Board members concerned about publicity. Friends checking if she was okay. Everyone wanting a piece of this story, this moment, this public humiliation. She texted Monica back. "Release a statement. Short and clear. Yes, it happened exactly as shown. And there will be consequences." Within minutes, the statement was out, and the media frenzy intensified. Thomas Wilson approached her car, sweating despite the air-conditioned terminal, his face pale and strained. "Ms. Mitchell, perhaps we could discuss some form of compensation for this unfortunate delay. The airport would like to make this right. Make it right. With money. Like this was about a delayed flight or lost luggage. Compensation. You want to pay me to forget that your employees racially profiled me? I'm trying to resolve this situation in a way that's beneficial for everyone involved. Beneficial would have been your staff not being racist. That opportunity has passed." She could see Richard, Stephen, and Jessica standing by the crew transportation vehicle, watching everything fall apart. Richard was on his phone, probably calling his union representative or a lawyer. Jessica was crying, her face in her hands. Stephen looked like he'd been hit by a truck, pale and shaking. They were realizing, probably for the first time, that this was career-ending. Not just the firing. The viral video with millions of views. The news coverage on every channel. The permanent internet record of their racism. No reputable charter company would ever hire a crew that had denied a black woman access to her own $42 million jet. Their careers in private aviation were finished. Diane felt something flicker in her chest. Not quite sympathy. Not forgiveness. But a kind of sad awareness. These three people's lives were about to implode completely. Their reputations destroyed. Their income gone. Their futures uncertain. Because they had looked at her skin color and made assumptions. Because they had acted on prejudice instead of facts. Because they had chosen racism. The replacement crew arrived right on schedule. Captain Angela Freeman was a black woman in her 40s, tall and professional in her uniform, with natural hair and an air of quiet competence. Co-pilot Raymond Torres was Latino, probably in his 30s, friendly smile and sharp eyes. Flight attendant Keisha Washington was a young black woman, maybe 25, who looked at Diane with immediate recognition and respect. Angela approached with her hand extended. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Captain Freeman. We're fully briefed and ready for departure whenever you are. I'm so sorry for what you experienced today. It was completely unacceptable." The difference was immediate and stark. Recognition. Respect. Professionalism. No questions about her identity. No demands for extra verification. Just a crew ready to do their jobs and treat her like the person who paid their salaries. Diane shook her hand, feeling some of the tension finally start to leave her body. "Thank you, Captain. Let's get to New York." She walked toward her jet, the one she owned, and this time no one blocked her path. She climbed the stairs and stepped into the cabin that she had designed personally, every detail chosen by her, every surface reflecting her taste and her success. She looked back at Richard, Stephen, and Jessica one last time. They were still standing there, watching her board, watching their careers end, watching the consequences of their choices become real. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But it was a start. Comment number 1 if you think Diane was absolutely right to fire that entire crew. Hit that like button if you've ever been judged or dismissed because of how you look. And subscribe because you need to see how this story continues when Diane faces down the people who wanted to stop this merger. What do you think happens when she walks into that boardroom in New York? Will they respect her, or will she have to fight another battle? Let's find out. The jet lifted off smoothly, Los Angeles falling away beneath them as they climbed to cruising altitude. Diane sat in a cream leather seat she had custom designed, surrounded by the luxury she had earned, finally able to breathe. Angela's voice came through the intercom, calm and professional. "Ms. Mitchell, we've reached cruising altitude of 41,000 feet. Estimated arrival time in New York is 4 hours and 12 minutes. Please let us know if you need anything at all." Just like that. Professional, competent, respectful. No drama, no interrogation, no racist assumptions. Just a crew doing their jobs the way it should have been from the beginning. Diane opened her laptop, already knowing what she would find. 367 unread emails in the hour since takeoff. Press requests from every major media outlet. Legal inquiries. Messages from civil rights organizations offering support. And buried in the middle, one email from Richard Hayes. She almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. The subject line read, "Misunderstanding." The email was long, defensive, every sentence dripping with self-justification. He had been following established security protocols that apply equally to all passengers. He was not a racist person and had flown with diverse clients many times without incident. He had been genuinely concerned about aircraft security and acting in good faith to protect valuable property. There was not one word of actual apology. Not one acknowledgement of what he had actually done to her. Not one moment of genuine reflection or remorse. The email ended with a line that made her blood boil. "I hope we can resolve this matter without unnecessary legal action. I have a family to support and a mortgage to pay." He had a family. As if she didn't. As if her dignity and rights were less important than his financial comfort. As if she should just accept being humiliated because taking action might inconvenience him. Diane forwarded the email to James with a single line of commentary. Evidence of complete lack of remorse and understanding. Use this however you need to. Her phone rang. Monica calling from Los Angeles. The merger meeting. Hamilton and Cross Industries called. They want to postpone given the circumstances, give you time to deal with the media situation. Diane's answer was immediate and firm. Absolutely not. I will be at that meeting exactly as scheduled. Tell them I'm on my way right now. Diane, the entire world is watching this story. Every news channel is covering it. Maybe you should take a day to let things calm down, prepare a proper response. Monica, listen to me carefully. If I postpone this meeting, if I hide, if I let this incident derail my business, then everyone watching will think this broke me. They'll think racism won. I'm closing this deal today, on schedule, exactly as planned. I need them to see that I'm unstoppable. The truth was deeper than that, though. She needed this deal now more than ever. Not for the money. Not even for the business success, though that mattered. She needed it for the statement it would make. A black woman gets denied boarding her own jet, humiliated, racially profiled, and 4 hours later she shows up and closes a $1.2 billion merger anyway. Unbreakable. Undeterred. Unfazed by racism because she's faced it her entire life and succeeded anyway. That was the message the world needed to see. Keisha brought her a coffee, prepared exactly how Diane liked it without having to ask because it was in the crew briefing notes. Ms. Mitchell, I just wanted to say what happened to you today was completely wrong and unacceptable. I'm honored to be part of your crew today. Diane looked at her, really looked at her, seeing a young black woman trying to build a career in an industry that probably gave her hell every single day. How long have you been in aviation? 6 years. Started as a commercial flight attendant, worked my way into private aviation 2 years ago. It's not easy. A lot of assumptions get made about black women in this industry. Like what kind of assumptions? Diane asked, though she already knew the answer. Like we're not capable of being pilots or owners. Like we're only qualified to serve drinks and clean cabins. Passengers have asked me to get the real flight attendant. I've been mistaken for cleaning crew at airports. I've had my qualifications questioned by people who wouldn't know how to open an emergency exit. It's constant. They talked for 20 minutes, Keisha sharing her experiences, the microaggressions and blatant discrimination she faced regularly. Passengers who clutched their valuables when she walked by. Clients who complained she wasn't professional enough when she wore her natural hair. Being paid less than white colleagues with the same experience. Having to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. Diane realized this wasn't just her story. This happened everywhere, constantly, to black women at every level trying to exist in spaces that weren't designed for them. She was just one of the very few with enough resources and platform to fight back publicly. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You ruined my career over nothing. I hope you're happy. Richard. She stared at the message, genuinely amazed by the audacity. He had ruined his own career by being racist. By choosing prejudice over evidence. By humiliating her on a tarmac in front of witnesses and cameras. And somehow in his mind, she was the villain for holding him accountable. She blocked the number without responding. Another text came through immediately, different number. Please, Ms. Mitchell. I have student loans I can barely afford. I can't lose this job. It wasn't my idea, I was just following orders. Stephen. The classic defense. Just following orders. The excuse used by people enabling evil since the beginning of time. Block. A third message. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing. Please, I'm begging you, give me another chance. I'll do anything to make this right. Jessica. Of the three, Jessica seemed genuinely remorseful. Her apology felt real, not transactional. But Diane didn't respond. Not yet. She needed time to think about what accountability and growth actually looked like, whether people who participated in racism deserved second chances just because they eventually felt bad about it. She looked out the window at the clouds stretching endlessly below, the sky infinite above. This jet was supposed to be her sanctuary, her escape, her reward for decades of struggle. Instead, it had become another battleground, another space where she had to fight for basic recognition of her humanity. But maybe that was the reality of being black in America. There was no sanctuary. There was no space safe from racism and assumption and diminishment. There was only the constant, exhausting fight to exist, to thrive, to be seen as fully human and worthy of respect. Angela's voice came through the intercom again. Ms. Mitchell, we'll be beginning our descent into New York in approximately 30 minutes. Current weather is clear, temperature is 62 degrees. Diane closed her laptop and began to prepare mentally. The merger meeting was with Hamilton and Cross Industries, an old-money white corporation run by Bradford Hamilton III, a man whose great-grandfather had started the company in 1897. Bradford was 67 years old, fourth-generation wealth, the kind of man who had never struggled for anything in his entire life. He had been skeptical of the merger from the very beginning, using coded language about cultural fit and compatibility and traditional business practices. Translation: he was uncomfortable working with a black woman, especially one whose company was worth more than his and growing 3 times faster. He acted like he was doing her a favor by even considering the merger, when the reality was his stagnant legacy company desperately needed her innovation and market share. Today she was walking into that boardroom with viral video evidence of the racism she faced splashed across every news channel in America. She could use it, play the sympathy card, make him uncomfortable enough to give her better terms. Or she could do what she had always done. Be so undeniably excellent, so thoroughly prepared, so completely professional that he had no choice but to respect her. Show him that racism couldn't break her, couldn't slow her down, couldn't stop her from being the most competent person in any room she entered. The plane touched down smoothly at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. A black car was waiting on the tarmac, her New York assistant Derek standing beside it with his tablet and his perfectly organized briefing materials. Derek was white, gay, fiercely loyal, and had been with her for 8 years. He had faced his own discrimination in corporate America and understood what it meant to fight for space in systems designed to exclude you. "Boss, are you okay? You're all over every news channel. This is insane. I'm perfect. Let's go close this deal." In the car, Derek briefed her on everything that had happened while she was in the air. Bradford Hamilton had called personally, expressing concern about the incident. "Concern for you, or concern that I'll be too controversial for his precious reputation?" Diane asked. "Probably both, if I'm being honest." "Good. Let him be concerned. Concerned people make mistakes, and I can use that." They pulled up to the Hamilton and Cross headquarters, a 50-story building with a marble lobby that screamed old money and traditional power. The security guard at the desk looked up as they entered. "Can I help you?" "Here we go again. Diane Mitchell." "I have a meeting with Bradford Hamilton." He checked his list, frowning. "I don't see your name here." Derek stepped forward before Diane could respond. "Check under Mitchell Global Logistics. She's the CEO." The guard scrolled through his computer, and his expression changed completely when he found it. "Oh. The CEO. I'm sorry, I thought you were, never mind. 67th floor, conference room A." What did he think? That the CEO of a multi-hundred-million-dollar company couldn't possibly be a black woman? That she must be an assistant or a secretary? Diane was so tired of this. So bone-deep exhausted from constantly having to prove she belonged in spaces her success had earned her access to. But she smiled politely and headed to the elevators, because showing her exhaustion would be seen as weakness, and she couldn't afford weakness. Not today. The 67th floor conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, the city spread out below like a promise of power and possibility. Bradford Hamilton III stood at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by his team, all white except for one woman, Patricia, the general counsel. Bradford extended his hand as Diane entered, his smile practiced and professional. "Diane, I'm glad you could make it despite your difficulties this morning. I saw the news coverage. Terrible situation, truly unfortunate." His tone was sympathetic, but there was something underneath it, a hint of skepticism, like he wasn't entirely sure the incident had been as bad as the video showed. Like maybe she was exaggerating or being oversensitive. Diane's voice was flat and cold. "It was worse than the video showed." They sat down, Bradford's team on one side of the table, Diane's team on the other. She had brought her CFO Terrence, a black man in his 50s with an MBA from Wharton and 20 years of experience. Her COO Lisa, a white woman in her 40s who had left a Fortune 500 company to work for Diane because she believed in the mission. James, her lawyer, sharp and prepared. And Derek, taking notes and managing logistics. Bradford cleared his throat. "Before we begin our business discussions, I want to address the elephant in the room. The incident this morning at the airport. It's most unfortunate. But I hope it won't distract from our important negotiations today." Unfortunate. Like a flight delay. Like bad weather. Like an inconvenience instead of racism, humiliation, and civil rights violations. Not like discrimination. Not like hatred. Not like a fundamental attack on her dignity as a human being. Diane kept her face completely neutral, giving him nothing. It won't distract me from business. Will it distract you? Bradford blinked, clearly not expecting the question turned back on him. Of course not. We're here to discuss a mutually beneficial merger. Then let's discuss it. For the next 2 hours, they negotiated every detail of the merger. Bradford's team tried to lowball the valuation of Mitchell Global, suggesting her company was worth 20% less than the independent appraisals showed. Terrence countered with hard data, revenue projections, market share analysis, growth trajectories that proved Mitchell Global was outperforming Hamilton and Cross in literally every meaningful metric. They tried to push for Bradford to be the sole CEO of the merged company. Lisa shut that down immediately with organizational charts showing how Diane's leadership structure was more efficient and produced better results. They tried to argue for maintaining Hamilton and Cross's existing corporate culture and policies. James pointed out that several of those policies were outdated and potentially legally problematic in modern employment law. Patricia, the general counsel, raised what she clearly thought was a trump card. Given today's publicity and media attention, there may be significant reputational risk associated with this merger. We need to consider how that impacts shareholder value. The implication was clear. Diane's very public experience with racism might make her controversial, might hurt the company's image, might cost them business. Lisa responded before Diane could, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Reputational risk from what exactly? From Ms. Mitchell being discriminated against? Or from her standing up to that discrimination publicly? Patricia backpedaled slightly. I'm simply noting that extensive media attention, regardless of the cause, can create market uncertainty and stakeholder concerns. The media attention demonstrates that Ms. Mitchell is a fighter who doesn't back down from injustice. That's exactly the kind of leader clients and investors want. Someone with backbone and principles. Bradford tried a different approach, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. Diane, your company is excellent, truly impressive what you've built. But it's also very specific in its demographic makeup, if you understand my meaning. Diane's voice was ice. Specific how? Well, your workforce is primarily minority employees. Our client base is more traditional, more conservative in some respects. We need to ensure cultural compatibility and smooth integration. The room went completely silent. Terrence leaned forward, his voice dangerously quiet. Are you saying you're concerned about having too many black and brown employees in the merged company? Bradford's face flushed slightly. I'm saying that cultural integration is a critical factor in merger success. We need to ensure that both companies' cultures can blend effectively. Diane had heard enough. She had been discriminated against on a tarmac 4 hours ago. She was not about to sit in this boardroom and accept more coded racism disguised as business concerns. She started putting her briefing materials back into her briefcase, her movements deliberate and final. Bradford, let me be absolutely clear. My company's demographic makeup is diverse, highly qualified, and consistently high-performing. If that diversity is incompatible with your corporate culture, then we don't have a deal. It's that simple. Bradford's face went pale as he realized she was serious, that she was actually preparing to walk out. Wait, please. That's not what I meant at all. Then what exactly did you mean? Use specific words. He stammered, his polished executive facade cracking under pressure. His team looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Patricia jumped in to save him, her voice carefully diplomatic. I think what Bradford is trying to express is that change management and cultural integration are important factors in any merger. We want to ensure a smooth transition process that benefits all employees from both organizations. Better phrasing. More diplomatic. Still condescending, still implying that Diane's diverse workforce was somehow a problem to be managed rather than an asset to be valued. But at least it was a step back from overt racism. Diane sat back down slowly, making it clear this was a conditional decision. Here's what's going to happen. We merge as equals. Your employees and my employees receive the same respect, the same opportunities, the same treatment. Or we walk away right now and you can watch your company continue its slow decline into irrelevance. We would technically be the majority shareholders in the merged entity by 8%. 8%. Hardly a mandate for control. And given that my growth rate is triple yours, in 2 years I would surpass your valuation entirely even without this merger. You need this deal significantly more than I need it. It was absolutely true and everyone in the room knew it. Hamilton and Cross was a legacy company coasting on reputation and old client relationships. They hadn't innovated in a decade. Their profit margins were shrinking. Their market share was eroding. Mitchell Global was dynamic, expanding aggressively, winning contracts from competitors, growing exponentially year over year. Bradford needed this merger to save his family's legacy company. Diane wanted it, but she could walk away and be fine. What are your terms? Bradford asked finally, his voice resigned. Diane laid them out clearly and firmly. Equal representation on the merged company's board of directors, with seats guaranteed for executives from both companies. Diversity requirements in hiring and promotion practices, with regular audits to ensure compliance. Mandatory anti-discrimination and unconscious bias training for all employees at every level. An independent HR reporting structure so employees could report problems without fear of retaliation from management. Bradford's team objected to each point, trying to water them down, trying to make them optional, trying to find loopholes. Diane didn't budge a single inch. She had spent the morning being racially profiled by her own employees. She was not going to walk into a merger where her people would face the same assumptions, the same discrimination, the same treatment. James backed her up with legal framework, citing employment law, discrimination statutes, corporate governance best practices. These terms are non-negotiable. And frankly, they represent basic corporate governance standards for 2025. Any company not meeting these minimum requirements is exposing itself to massive legal liability. The negotiation stretched into the evening, the sun setting over Manhattan, the city lights beginning to glow. Bradford pushed back, conceded, pushed back again. His lawyers tried to find compromises. Diane held firm on the core principles while allowing minor flexibility on implementation timelines and specific metrics. Finally, after 6 hours of intense back and forth, they reached an agreement. Not everything Diane wanted. The diversity requirements were aspirational goals, instead of hard requirements, which she hated but accepted as the price of getting the deal done. But it was progress. Real, meaningful progress. They shook hands across the table, the merger officially agreed to pending final legal documentation. $1.2 billion. The biggest deal of her career. The culmination of 23 years of building and fighting and proving herself. Bradford smiled, trying to smooth over the tension of the day. I look forward to working together, Diane. Despite today's unfortunate complications. There it was again. Complications. Not racism. Not discrimination. Not a fundamental attack on her humanity. Just complications, like scheduling conflicts or budget overruns. Diane smiled tightly, her teeth showing but her eyes cold. The only complication was people assuming I didn't belong in spaces my success has earned me. That won't be a problem going forward with you and your team, will it, Bradford? Of course not. We're all professionals here. She gathered her materials and left the building, victorious but absolutely exhausted. In the car heading back to the airport, Derek asked quietly, "Did you get what you wanted?" Diane thought about the question. "I got the deal. Whether it's what I wanted, whether it will actually change anything, we'll see. We'll have to watch them closely to make sure they honor the spirit of the agreement and not just the letter. Her phone rang. Monica, her voice tight with stress. Diane, Richard Hayes is giving interviews to the media. He's on Fox News right now saying you overreacted, that he was just doing his job following security protocols, that you're playing the race card to destroy an innocent man's career. Of course he was. The narrative was already shifting, exactly as she had known it would. From racist crew denies black CEO access to her own jet, to difficult angry black woman ruins innocent white man's career. She had seen this story play out 1,000 times. The victim becomes the villain. The person hurt becomes the aggressor. The person demanding accountability becomes unreasonable. Get ahead of it. I want to give one major interview tomorrow. National news, prime time. I'll tell my complete story in my own words before he can control the narrative. Which network? All of them. Set up a press conference. The next morning, Diane sat in a CNN studio in New York, full makeup and professional styling, facing anchor Stephanie Roberts across a small table designed to look intimate for television. Stephanie was a white woman in her 40s, award-winning journalist, known for tough interviews. The cameras went live, and Stephanie dove right in. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for joining us. Let's start with what happened 2 days ago at Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles. Walk us through exactly what occurred. Diane told the story calmly and factually, keeping her emotions controlled. The denial of boarding. The security guards called on her. The humiliation of having to prove her identity over and over while every piece of evidence was dismissed. The crew's inability to believe a black woman could own a $42 million private jet. Stephanie listened, then presented the other side. Captain Richard Hayes has stated publicly that he was simply following standard security protocols. He says he didn't recognize you from your profile photographs and was acting out of legitimate concern for aircraft security. What's your response to that? I have flown with Captain Hayes 4 previous times. He knew exactly who I was. Diane pulled out her phone and brought up photographs, handing her phone to Stephanie. Here is a photo from our flight in May. Here's June. July. August. For different flights where he shook my hand, spoke with me, served me on my own aircraft. He absolutely knew who I was. The photographs were damning, showing Richard and Diane together on the tarmac, him smiling in his captain's uniform, her standing beside her jet. The evidence was incontrovertible. Stephanie pivoted to the angle Diane had been expecting. Some people are saying that firing the entire crew was too harsh a response. That everyone makes mistakes. That you've essentially destroyed 3 people's careers over one incident. Captain Hayes has been in aviation for 28 years. He has a family to support. What do you say to people who think the punishment doesn't fit the crime? Diane's patience, already worn thin, finally snapped. And what about my career? My reputation? Do you know how many deals I've almost lost because people assumed I was unqualified based solely on my race? How many times I've had to prove myself when white male CEOs never have to? How many times I've been dismissed, diminished, questioned, doubted? Stephanie looked uncomfortable. I'm not suggesting that your experience isn't valid. You're suggesting I should have been more understanding. That I should have let it go. That I should have prioritized Richard Hayes's comfort and career over my own dignity. Would you ask that question if I were a white man? Silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Let me tell you what would have happened if I had let this go. Richard would have kept his job. He would have kept profiling and discriminating. And the next black woman who tried to board a private jet, the one without my resources or platform or ability to fight back, she would have faced the exact same treatment. Except she wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. She would have just had to accept it. So you're saying this is about more than just your personal experience? It was never about just me. This is about a system that tells people like Richard Hayes that black women cannot own jets, cannot run companies, cannot exist in spaces of wealth and power. And when we do exist in those spaces, we must be imposters or criminals or mistakes. I refuse to accept that. And yes, there were consequences for that refusal. The interview continued for 30 minutes, Diane articulating clearly and powerfully everything she had experienced, everything she felt, everything she knew to be true about racism in America. The full interview went viral within hours. Clips were everywhere on social media. Black CEO destroys interviewer defending racist pilot. Diane Mitchell refuses to back down. This is what fighting back looks like. Public opinion, which had been mixed, shifted dramatically. Civil rights organizations offered their full support. Other black business owners started sharing their own stories of discrimination, creating a wave of testimony about the constant battles they fought. A hashtag emerged and started trending, #BelieveBlackExcellence. But the backlash was fierce and frightening. Conservative media attacked her relentlessly. Fox News ran segments about race-baiting executives ruining innocent people's lives. Talk radio hosts called her divisive, angry, playing the victim. Death threats poured into her email and social media. Racist messages so vile she couldn't read them all. Threats against her daughter. Threats against her employees. Security had to be increased at her home in Los Angeles, at her offices, at every property associated with her. Simone called, her voice shaking with fear. "Mom, people are saying horrible things online. They're threatening to hurt you. Are you safe?" "I'm fine, baby. I have security. This is just noise from people who are threatened by successful black women. These people are crazy. They're talking about coming to the house, about finding you. Mom, this is serious. I know it's serious. But we don't back down from threats. We don't let racists silence us just because they're loud and violent. Your grandmother taught me that. Stand up, speak truth, and don't ever let them make you small." 3 days after the tarmac incident, Richard Hayes filed a lawsuit. Wrongful termination. Defamation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was seeking $12 million in damages, claiming Diane had destroyed his reputation and career based on a misunderstanding that she had deliberately mischaracterized as racism for publicity and sympathy. James was ready with a counterclaim before Richard's ink was dry. Discrimination. Civil rights violations. Intentional infliction of emotional distress right back at him. We'll destroy him in discovery. And when we're done, he'll wish he'd never filed this frivolous lawsuit. The legal battle began in earnest. During discovery, Richard's employment history was subpoenaed and examined in detail. And a pattern emerged, clear and undeniable. A complaint from 3 years ago when he had flown a famous black musician, whose manager noted that Richard had been dismissive and borderline rude throughout the flight. A note from 2 years ago about an Indian tech CEO who mentioned Richard seemed surprised and skeptical about her ownership of the aircraft. A Latino businessman who said Richard had questioned his payment method and seemed to doubt he could afford the flight. Every single time, the charter company had dismissed the complaints as personality conflicts or cultural misunderstandings. Never racism. Never a pattern. Never something requiring action or consequences. Until Diane. Stephen and Jessica were not part of the lawsuit. Stephen had found another job in aviation, keeping his head down and his mouth shut, trying to move past the incident quietly. Jessica had posted a video apology on YouTube that went moderately viral. She sat in her small apartment, no makeup, clearly emotional, and spoke directly to the camera. "My name is Jessica Torres, and I was the flight attendant who participated in denying Ms. Diane Mitchell access to her own aircraft. I was wrong. I participated in racial profiling and discrimination. I followed Captain Hayes's lead without questioning whether what we were doing was right. I made assumptions based on Ms. Mitchell's race, and those assumptions were racist. I'm deeply sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted Ms. Mitchell and everyone watching to know that I understand now what I did. I'm in therapy. I'm learning about implicit bias and systemic racism. I'm trying to be better. But I can't undo the harm I caused, and I have to live with that. The video was genuine, raw, clearly coming from real remorse and growth. Diane watched it 3 times, trying to decide what she felt about it. After the 3rd viewing, she called Jessica's number. Jessica answered on the first ring, her voice shaking. Ms. Mitchell? I saw your video apology. Jessica started crying immediately. I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did to you. What changed? What made you understand? I talked to my grandmother. She's from Mexico, came here when she was 16. She told me about being dismissed and diminished her whole life. Being treated like she didn't belong anywhere. Being told she wasn't good enough. And I realized I did that exact same thing to you. I became the person who hurt my abuela. And I hated myself for it. Diane was quiet for a long moment. What are you doing now for work? I'm waiting tables at a restaurant in Miami. I can't get hired in aviation anymore. No one will touch me after what happened. Send me your resume. What? Why? I'm not hiring you back. Let me be very clear about that. But I know people in the industry. If you're genuinely serious about learning and changing and being better, maybe someone will be willing to give you a chance. Maybe. Jessica's sobbing intensified. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you so much. You don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. But grace and accountability can exist together. You're the only one who actually apologized sincerely. Who actually listened and learned. That has to mean something. Diane hung up, not entirely sure if she had done the right thing. But she believed in growth, in change, in the possibility that people could be better than their worst moments. The lawsuit with Richard dragged on for months, both sides filing motions, taking depositions, building their cases. Richard's lawyers tried to paint Diane as aggressive, difficult, angry, using every stereotype about black women to undermine her credibility. Diane's lawyers presented mountains of evidence, testimony from other people who had experienced Richard's bias, the damning pattern of complaints, the irrefutable facts. The judge assigned to the case was Ana Maria Gonzalez, a Latina woman in her 50s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings and zero tolerance for discrimination. At a preliminary hearing, she looked at Richard directly and asked a question that cut through all the legal maneuvering. Captain Hayes, you're asking this court to believe that you genuinely did not recognize a woman you had flown with 4 separate times over a 6-month period? Richard, sitting with his lawyers, responded carefully. Your Honor, it was an honest mistake made in good faith while following security protocols. Judge Gonzalez looked at the photographs Diane's team had submitted, showing Richard and Diane together on multiple occasions. An honest mistake that, according to the evidence presented, only seems to occur with passengers and owners of color. That's quite a pattern of honest mistakes, wouldn't you say? The lawsuit began to fall apart. Richard's lawyers started pushing for settlement, realizing they were going to lose badly at trial and possibly expose Richard to additional liability. 2 weeks before the scheduled trial date, Richard dropped the lawsuit entirely, releasing a statement that he was moving forward with his life and career. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just retreat. But Diane had won. Not just the legal battle, but the larger war. Richard gave one final interview to a sympathetic conservative podcast, his last attempt to control the narrative. I still believe I did nothing wrong. This is political correctness gone completely mad. A man can't even do his job anymore without being accused of racism. My life has been destroyed because I followed security procedures. Diane didn't respond to the interview. She didn't need to. The world had seen who he was. The evidence had spoken for itself. Justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. 6 months after the incident on the tarmac, Diane's world had transformed completely. The merger between Mitchell Global and Hamilton and Cross was officially complete, creating a combined entity valued at $3.8 billion. Diane served as co-chair of the new company, though everyone understood she was the de facto leader. Bradford Hamilton III had retired early, citing a desire to spend more time with family, which was corporate speak for being forced out by the board after his handling of the merger integration proved disastrous. Diane implemented her diversity and inclusion programs across the entire merged organization, and the resistance was immediate and fierce. Hiring initiatives that prioritized qualified candidates from underrepresented groups. Mentorship programs pairing senior executives with junior employees of color. Mandatory unconscious bias training that actually challenged people to examine their assumptions instead of just checking a box. Some employees embraced the changes enthusiastically. Others fought back hard. Several senior executives from the Hamilton and Cross side resigned rather than participate, issuing statements about declining corporate culture and political agendas overtaking business priorities. Diane didn't chase after them or try to convince them to stay. If you can't work effectively in a diverse environment, if you can't treat all employees with equal respect regardless of their race or background, then you're not valuable to this company. Leave. And they did leave, taking their outdated attitudes and discriminatory practices with them. The company didn't just survive their departures. It thrived. Revenue increased by 32% in the first 6 months after the merger. The client base expanded dramatically as new customers, particularly companies owned by women and minorities, chose to work with a firm that demonstrably valued diversity. Government contracts were awarded based on the company's improved diversity metrics and commitment to equal opportunity. Turns out diversity wasn't just a moral imperative. It was profitable. It brought in new perspectives, new ideas, new markets, new opportunities that the old guard had been too limited to see. Van Nuys Airport reached out through their lawyers, new management having taken over after the incident became a public relations nightmare. Ms. Mitchell, we would like to extend a formal apology for the treatment you received at our facility. We have implemented comprehensive new protocols for private aviation services, including mandatory training on implicit bias and discrimination. We would like to offer you complimentary hangar space for 1 year as a gesture of our commitment to making this right. Diane asked one question before accepting. What happened to Thomas Wilson? Mr. Wilson is no longer employed by this airport. Good. Then I accept your offer. Not because she needed free hangar space. But because accountability mattered. Because consequences for enabling racism mattered. Richard Hayes was working as a flight instructor at a small regional airport in Arizona now, according to the Industry Gossip Network. His career in high-end private aviation was finished, his reputation destroyed, his earning potential reduced to a fraction of what it had been. Diane didn't celebrate his downfall. But she didn't mourn it either. He had made choices. He had acted on prejudice. He was experiencing the natural consequences of those choices. Actions have consequences. Jessica Torres was working for a small charter company in Miami, the job Diane had helped her get through a quiet phone call to a contact in the industry. Jessica sent Diane a card every few months with updates on her progress. She was still in therapy, still learning, still trying to be better. She had started volunteering with organizations that fought discrimination in the aviation industry. She was attempting, genuinely, to turn her mistake into growth. Diane appreciated that effort, even if she never fully forgave what had happened. Stephen Bradford had disappeared from the aviation industry entirely. No one seemed to know where he was or what he was doing. He had simply vanished, unable or unwilling to face the consequences of his participation. The tarmac incident had changed the aviation industry in measurable ways. Several major charter companies revised their security protocols and crew training programs. New policies specifically addressed racial profiling and discrimination. Training modules on recognizing and confronting implicit bias became standard. Some companies even named their new protocols, the Mitchell Standards, in recognition of what had happened and what needed to change. Diane was invited to speak at industry conferences and business leadership events. She talked about her experience honestly, but she also talked about solutions. We cannot eliminate racism overnight. It's too deeply embedded in our systems and our culture. But we can eliminate tolerance for racism. We can make it clear that discriminatory behavior has real, immediate, career-ending consequences. We can change the cost-benefit analysis so that acting on racist assumptions becomes too expensive to risk. Young black women approached her after every speech, their eyes shining with emotion and determination. You inspired me to start my own business. I was afraid, but watching you fight back gave me courage. I stood up to discrimination at my job because of you. I reported my supervisor and they actually faced consequences. My daughter is 8 years old, and she wants to be a CEO like you when she grows up. She thinks she can do anything now. This was the impact that mattered more than money or business success. Changing what seemed possible. Showing young black girls that they could take up space, demand respect, build empires, and fight back when people tried to diminish them. Her daughter Simone graduated from Harvard Business School in May, at the top of her class, with job offers from Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and Google. Every prestigious company wanted her, seeing her mother's strength reflected in her. But Simone made a different choice. Mom, I want to work for Mitchell Global. I want to build what you built, but bigger and better. Diane's heart swelled with pride and fear in equal measure. You know what you'll face. You've seen what I go through. It might be even worse for you because you're young and people will assume you only got opportunities because of me. I know. But I also know I don't face it alone. You showed me that. You showed me how to fight, how to stand up, how to win. Simone officially joined Mitchell Global as a junior executive, and within 3 months she was being promoted based on merit and performance. At Simone's Harvard graduation ceremony, a woman approached Diane while she was waiting for Simone to receive her diploma. Ms. Mitchell. I'm Captain Angela Freeman. I was your pilot the day of the incident, when I flew you to New York. They hugged like old friends, though they had only met briefly. Angela, how are you? How's your career going? I'm flying for Delta now, commercial aviation, major routes. The publicity from that day, the attention it brought to black women in aviation, I got recruited. Multiple airlines wanted to show they valued diversity. Your fight opened doors for me. You deserved those opportunities. You're an excellent pilot. I'm glad my pain created something positive for you. It meant everything. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not staying quiet. Diane realized in that moment that her suffering, as terrible as it had been, had created ripples of change and opportunity for other people. That didn't make the pain worth it, didn't justify what had happened. But it made it mean something larger than just her individual experience. She visited her mother's grave in Los Angeles, bringing fresh flowers and sitting on the grass beside the headstone. Mama, I did what you said. I proved them wrong so completely they can't recover. Richard Hayes lost his career. The airport changed its policies. The industry created new standards. And I closed the biggest deal of my life 4 hours after they tried to break me. She told Dorothy everything, knowing her mother couldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. About the jet, the denial, the fight, the victory, the changes. I wish you were here to see it. To see Simone graduate from Harvard. To see everything we built. But Dorothy was there, in every lesson she had taught, in every bit of strength she had instilled, in every refusal to accept less than full humanity. Diane bought a second private jet, even bigger and more luxurious than the first. A Gulfstream G700, the newest model, $65 million of pure excellence. And she made a deliberate choice about the crew. She hired an all-black team. Captain, co-pilot, flight attendants, all black excellence. Not because white crews couldn't be trusted, though she understood why some people would make that assumption after what she'd experienced. But because black professionals deserve to be centered, to be visible, to take up space in luxury aviation. The first flight on the new jet was with Simone, just the two of them flying to Martha's Vineyard for a mother-daughter weekend. "Where are we going, Mom?" Simone asked as they settled into the leather seats. "Wherever we want, baby. That's the entire point. Freedom. Choice. Space that belongs to us." They flew in peace, no drama, no incidents, no one questioning their right to be there. This was what Diane had fought for. Not the jet itself, though that mattered. But this moment. This freedom. This peace. This absolute certainty that she belonged. 1 year after the tarmac incident, Diane received an email that she never expected to see. The subject line read, "Request for meeting, Richard Hayes." She stared at it for a full minute before opening it, her finger hovering over the delete button, curiosity battling with anger. The email was brief and surprisingly humble. "Ms. Mitchell, I know I have absolutely no right to ask this. But I would like to speak with you in person, if you're willing. This is not for legal reasons or any kind of trick. I have something I need to say to you face to face. I understand completely if you refuse. Richard Hayes." She showed the email to James immediately. It could be a trap. He could be recording you, trying to get you to say something he can use for another lawsuit or for publicity. Maybe. But I'm curious what he could possibly want to say after everything that's happened. She agreed to meet, but only in a public place with Derek present. A coffee shop in Santa Monica, mid-afternoon, plenty of witnesses. Richard was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking older and more tired than she remembered. His hair was grayer, his face more lined, his shoulders slumped in a way that spoke of defeat. He stood when she entered, a gesture of respect she noted. "Ms. Mitchell. Thank you for coming. I genuinely didn't think you would." She sat down across from him, Derek taking a table nearby within earshot, and said nothing, waiting for him to explain himself. Richard took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. "I've spent the past year thinking about that day at the airport. About what I did to you. About why I did it. And I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I was wrong. Not just procedurally, not just about following the wrong protocol. Morally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. I saw a black woman walking toward that jet, and my brain literally could not process the possibility that you owned it. The racism was so deep in my thinking that I couldn't see reality even when it was right in front of me." Diane waited, still silent, still giving him nothing. "I've been in court-mandated therapy since another incident at my new job. A black student pilot who I apparently treated differently than white students, questioning her abilities more, doubting her more, making her prove herself more. I didn't even realize I was doing it until her father filed a complaint. The therapy was supposed to be just to check a box, but I actually stayed with it. I've been learning about implicit bias, about systemic racism, about all the assumptions I've carried my entire life without examining them. Why are you telling me this, Richard? Because you deserve an apology. A real one. Not the defensive, self-justifying garbage I said during the lawsuit and the media interviews. I'm sorry. I'm deeply, truly sorry for humiliating you. For denying your humanity. For causing you pain and trauma. For making you fight for something that should have been automatic. For every single thing I did that day." The words hung in the air between them, and Diane studied his face carefully, looking for insincerity or manipulation. All she found was regret, genuine and deep. What do you want from me, Richard? Nothing. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. About me, about what I did, about why I did it. This is entirely selfish on my part. I couldn't move forward without saying this to your face. You're right that it's selfish. I didn't need you to tell me I was right. I already knew that. I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't live with myself without at least trying to apologize properly. They sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop noise filling the space between them. Diane chose her next words carefully. You destroyed your own career, Richard. You understand that, right? I didn't do it. You did, through your own choices and actions. I know. I know that now. It took me a long time to accept it, but I know. And even now, even with therapy and apologies and claimed understanding, you still don't fully comprehend what you took from me that day. Richard looked at her, waiting. Tell me. Please. You took my joy. I bought that jet because it represented everything I had overcome in my life. Freedom. Success. Safety from the constant discrimination I face everywhere else. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. And you turned it into another battleground, another place where I had to prove I deserved to exist, another space where my humanity was questioned. That joy, that feeling of sanctuary, you destroyed it. And your apology, sincere as it might be, doesn't give that back to me. Richard's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what that feels like, to have worked so hard and still have to fight for basic respect everywhere you go. You can't imagine it because you've never had to live it. You've existed your entire life in spaces where you were automatically assumed to belong. You have no reference point for what I experience. I know. And I'm sorry for that too, for my ignorance, for my privilege, for everything. Diane stood up, preparing to leave. This conversation concluded. Richard stood as well, looking like he wanted to say more but didn't know what. She started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to face him. Richard, if you really want to make amends, don't do it with me. I don't need anything from you. Do it with the next person. The next black woman you encounter in a space you don't expect her. The next person of color who challenges your assumptions. When you feel that doubt rising, when your brain tries to tell you they don't belong, check yourself. Question your assumptions. Examine your bias. And treat them like they belong, because they do. That's how you make amends. I will. I promise you I will. Promises are easy. Actions are what matter. Be better. Actually be better. She left the coffee shop, Derek following her out into the bright California sunshine. In the car, Derek asked quietly, "How do you feel?" Tired. But lighter somehow. Like I can finally close this chapter and move forward. That evening, she was home in Bel Air, the house she had fought to belong in, the space she had earned. Simone came over for dinner, and they cooked together like they had when Simone was young, talking and laughing and enjoying each other's company. Mom, I got some news today. I've been offered a CEO position. Diane's heart skipped. What? Where? It's a small tech startup, but they're doing innovative work in logistics automation. They want me to lead the company. They think I can take them to the next level. Baby, that's incredible. What did you tell them? I said yes. I start in 2 months. I'll be the youngest black female CEO in tech. 23 years old. Diane hugged her daughter tightly, feeling pride and fear mixing together in her chest. You're going to face everything I faced. Maybe worse, because you're young and people will doubt you even more. They'll say you got the job because of me, because of connections, because of diversity quotas. They'll question everything you do. I know, Mom. But I also know I won't face it alone. You showed me how to fight. How to stand up. How to demand the respect I deserve. How to be excellent even when people don't want to see it. They ate dinner together, talking about Simone's plans, her vision for the company, her excitement and nervousness. Diane watched her daughter's face, animated and confident, and saw the future. Saw a generation of black women who wouldn't accept being diminished, who would demand space and respect, who would build empires and refuse to apologize for their success. Later, Diane stood on her balcony overlooking Los Angeles, the city lights spreading to the horizon like stars. She thought about Dorothy, about the journey from cleaning houses to private jets, from invisibility to magazine covers, from being denied to being undeniable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Monica. Diane, we've been approached about a documentary film about your story. Major studio, serious budget, wide distribution. Are you interested? Diane considered the question. Another opportunity to tell the story, to make it mean something, to turn her pain into purpose. Tell them yes, but I have one condition. What's that? It's not just my story. It needs to tell the stories of every black woman fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be believed. This is bigger than me. They'll love that angle. This could be really powerful. The documentary filmed over 6 months, interviews with Diane but also with dozens of other black women across industries. Pilots, doctors, lawyers, business owners, executives. All telling stories of being dismissed, doubted, discriminated against. All sharing the constant battle to prove their humanity and worth. The film premiered at Sundance and received a standing ovation. It was picked up for wide distribution, won awards, started conversations, led to policy changes at companies across the country. Real, measurable impact. Diane attended the official premiere in Los Angeles with Simone, Monica, her entire executive team, everyone who had supported her through the fight. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, Simone turned to her with tears in her eyes. Mom, was it worth it? Everything you went through, all the pain and the fighting and the cost. Was it worth it? Diane thought about the question seriously, weighing the trauma against the change, the personal cost against the collective benefit. Yes. Every single moment of it was worth it. Because I didn't just fight for myself. I fought for your grandmother and every black woman who came before me who couldn't fight back. And I fought for you and every black woman who comes after, so maybe your battles won't be quite as hard. So maybe the next generation won't have to prove themselves quite so much. That's worth any price. Because she hadn't just survived racism. She had fought it, exposed it, forced consequences for it, and changed systems because of it. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. She had been denied boarding her own jet, and she had fired the entire crew, won the legal battle, closed the billion-dollar deal, changed industry practices, and showed the world exactly what happened when you underestimated a black woman who refused to stay quiet. The screen faded to black with final text appearing. Diane Mitchell continues to lead her company, now valued at over $4 billion. She owns 3 private jets. And she has never been denied boarding again. Her daughter Simone is the youngest black female tech CEO in Silicon Valley. The changes Diane fought for have benefited thousands of people across the aviation and business industries. Some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. What did you think of Diane's journey? Drop a comment and tell me if you've ever had to fight for respect in a space where people assumed you didn't belong. Smash that like button if this story moved you or made you think differently about discrimination and accountability. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about people who refuse to back down from injustice. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's limited imagination. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, you belong in every space your hard work and excellence have earned you. Never let anyone tell you different. Until next time, stay strong and keep rising higher. Diane Mitchell's story teaches us that silence in the face of discrimination only perpetuates the system. When she was denied boarding her own jet, she could have quietly resolved it and moved on, but she understood that her platform meant responsibility. Her fight wasn't just personal, it was structural. The lesson here is clear: accountability matters more than comfort. Richard Hayes faced consequences not because Diane was vindictive, but because actions rooted in racism must have real costs to create change. We learn that documentation and evidence are crucial when challenging discrimination. Diane had photos, emails, and specific details that made her case irrefutable. Another vital lesson is that excellence alone isn't enough. Diane was a CEO worth hundreds of millions, yet she still faced assumptions based solely on her race. This reveals the depth of systemic bias that no amount of individual achievement can fully escape. We also see the power of using privilege and platform to benefit others. Diane's public fight opened doors for Captain Angela Freeman and countless others facing similar treatment. Perhaps most importantly, we learn that healing and accountability can coexist. Diane showed grace to Jessica while maintaining firm boundaries with Richard, demonstrating that forgiveness is personal but justice is collective. The fight against racism requires both individual courage and systemic change, and sometimes one person's refusal to accept injustice can spark transformation that benefits thousands. Have you or someone you know ever been discriminated against in a professional setting? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below because your experience matters and others need to hear it. If you believe that racism has no place in any industry and that people like Diane deserve respect regardless of their race, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because we share stories of courage, justice, and people who refuse to be diminished by prejudice. Share this video with someone who needs to see an example of standing up to discrimination with strength and dignity. Thank you so much for watching Diane's powerful journey from humiliation to victory. Your support helps these important stories reach more people and creates conversations that can actually change minds and systems. Remember, you have every right to exist in spaces your hard work has earned you, and never let anyone's limited beliefs make you question your worth. Stay strong, keep fighting for justice, and we'll see you in the next story. Until then, rise higher.